Welcome to the Deep End with Halen Pittman. I'm your host, of course, Halen Pittman. Guest with me tonight, Logan Jenkins.
Hello.
If you haven't listened to our first episode, we like to dig deeper into forgotten or underrepresented, underappreciated media, locations, songs, comics. Basically give those things more credit that we wish the world would. Tell me what you brought forth.
My topic is based... It's kind of tertiary. The primary thing is Neil Gaiman. He's got plenty of coverage. The secondary thing is his book, American Gods, which focuses on gods in general of all types. And American gods would be like technology.
And I'm sorry if this is spoilers for anyone who hasn't, that belief creates existence. And those beliefs created creatures that are those gods.
The newer gods are all assholes.
Right.
The brunt of the reason why I bring it up is because I want to do a tourist trap location, because there's a really important tourist trap in American Gods. The House on the Rock, I think, is and specifically the merry-go-round transports them to Odin's mind. Okay, so I'm going to read a quote from the book. In the USA, people still get the call, or some of them. They feel themselves being called to from the transcendent void, and they respond to it by building a model of it out of beer bottles or somewhere they've never visited, or by erecting a gigantic bat house in some part of the country that bats have traditionally declined to visit. Roadside attractions. People feel themselves being pulled to places where in other parts of the world they would recognize that part of themselves that is truly transcendent and buy a hot dog and walk around, feeling satisfied on a level they cannot truly describe, and profoundly dissatisfied on a level beneath that. That's basically the breakdown of tourist traps in the book. That was very much in my mind when I was in high school and probably the first part of college. And Trey, the guest on the first episode, who's my best friend, coincidentally, we often went to a beach house that his parents owned. That was just like a time for road trips. And so that was part of the whole deal, was a road trip. For some reason, we just kept seeing these south of the border signs on the road to Myrtle Beach. South of the border is just a sort of racist caricature of a Mexican man, and he's just wearing a sombrero and in basically Speedy Gonzales, but a little bit more colorful and not a mouse. Yeah,
it's definitely that 1950s style of over the top. Not intentionally trying to be racist, but just trying to be funny, and explain why it's called South of the Border.
Well, because it's right below North Carolina. Is that correct?
Correct. It is just below the North Carolina-South Carolina border. I believe...
It's incidentally not anywhere near Myrtle Beach.
No. The place was founded as a liquor store originally, and I believe in the 40s, because it was surrounded by dry counties and people could come from North Carolina just over to buy liquor. And they called it South of the Border jokingly. Because it was dry, and it was one of those.
Contraband.
Because liquor laws in Prohibition South, like post-Prohibition South, are ridiculous. And even in South Carolina, I think we're the only state to have an official state distillery. That for a while, all legal liquor in South Carolina had to come from the state. Because I guess they were justifying that moonshine will make people go blind and poison people. So and those are actually major collector's items, as people collect glass bottles from the South Carolina distillery. We still have that legacy today, where lots of counties and municipalities have blue laws that only allow you to sell liquor on certain days or certain times, or in certain relation to churches or schools that are around the area.
That actually gives the whole thing a little bit more gravitas to me, because if it's sort of a modern Bacchus,
yes.
That's even more...
Right, because I believe that was... Because, the south of the border itself, I don't know if you're going to talk about this, it's not just a tourist trap now, but it is also there's like a petting zoo, there are hotel rooms.
Mm-hmm. I know there was a big Ferris wheel, but the details of south of the border are sort of blurred for me, because we arrived... As I said, we were going to Myrtle Beach, and we arrived at south of the border, which is... certainly not Myrtle Beach, which is sort of, we were in this mindset. Me and Trey, we're at the time had just finished American Gods, and it was very much top of the mind. Those signs, we were just like, we should really go there. I'm not the best navigator in the world. It takes me many, many trips before I'm comfortable with a route. I certainly was not comfortable with the Myrtle Beach route. At some point, we were very far off of our destination. We missed an exit or something, and we could either arrive at Myrtle Beach late, but still in a reasonable amount of time, or we could go to south of the border, which was only like 20 miles away at that point. It was quickly unanimous. We're going to south of the border. One important detail is that it was like 3 in the morning. It was very late. When we arrived, in the mentality that this was a sort of haven for modern gods and a worship center for commerce and exploitative culture. So in all those ways, while it is sort of, at the time, for us, it was just like the perfect Cliff's Notes of American Gods, just right there. We wanted to go to the actual site of House on the Rock, but that was pretty far away. And this really evoked the same sort of feelings. I mean, really, any tourist trap would get you where you're going if you've read American Gods. Preferably one with a merry-go-round, which I don't think south of the border had, but again, it was 3 in the morning, so not a lot of the attractions were open.
But they do sell fireworks.
There was also like a very like a wiener dog sort of statue that sort of stood in ominous, and it was just, I mean, the fact that it was 3 in the morning added so much to it because everything was horrific. Like every sculpture, which there were a lot. And the wiener dog thing that didn't have any place in this at all. They all took this sinister tone because it was so dark, and they were lit from the bottom, so it was like you were telling it was, are you afraid of the dark shit?
That's awesome.
It was just like this scary thing that we were just giddy with how close it was of an experience of exactly what we had read in American Gods, and just kind of like reveling in that. This culture that somehow got created from people having cars and transportation and roadside things to pull people in and spend money.
Yeah, I mean that's wonderful though. But that's great American entrepreneurship, and that's the big part of post-war America. Post-World War II America is getting the family in and going and driving. And I love that some of these things still exist. I mean, classically, I know in American history, Route 66 was the big thing. All
you
that,
get your kicks.
Yeah, and almost that has died. But you'd see like those desert sculptures of people burying cars in the sand, like sticking up. Have you ever seen any of those pictures?
No.
People used to do all types of roadside artwork. Huh. That was a huge thing in a lot of these things, was people doing like outsider art everywhere. They have in Canada, they have these things called the Giants of the Prairies. They were the same thing about building gigantic statues of whatever, of folk creatures, folk heroes, Paul Bunyan, whatever. All right, let me talk a little bit about tonight's film, Torture Garden, 1967. Horror anthology films have always been a really interesting mixed bag. Originally, as far as I could track back, the first famous one, 1945's Dead of Night, and that's a pretty good picture. But you get tons of these in the 70s with like Trilogy of Terror and Tales from the Dark Side, the movies in the 80s, Creep Show. And even to today with things like just Trick or Treat or VHS, the ABCs of Death. But this film that we're watching tonight from 1967, created by Amicus Films. Amicus traditionally thought of as the lower rent brother to Hammer Films, which brought back the classic monsters like werewolves and vampires and Frankenstein monster in the 60s with Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing. This is where all these guys really start. That's Hammer. Amicus is kind of thought of their low-rent brother, who kind of follows along the tag. And they created a series of what the director called portmanteau films. Portmanteau is when you need to take two different words and shove them together to create a new word.
Okay.
We'll be watching the second tonight. I watched last night, just to try to get back into it, Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, which I believe is 64, 63. Either way, Peter Cushing plays a fortune teller telling these 5 different people their futures, because it was like tap the tarot deck and it'll tell you the future that'll happen to you, and tap it one more time and I'll pull the card and show you how you can escape your fate.
Wow.
And that's the frame story. And
so it's a vignette of small horror.
I don't want to spoil it, but we'll play it, and then when we come back on the other side, you'll see why I picked it tonight in relation to roadside attractions here on the Deep End. All right, then. So we watched the movie. What'd you think of Torture Garden, Logan?
I really liked it.
It's an anthology film with several people going into a sideshow. Guy being
the crappy sideshow where he just shows a guy not getting electrocuted. It was just like a wax dummy, I guess.
And the fake skeleton strapped to the wheel.
Yeah.
And all the beds. And they're like, well, you've got this for 2 sixpence. For £5, you can see the real terror.
So for like a lot of money. So basically, you paid 50 cents for your average creep show thing. That's just like, it's eyeballs, but it's really just graves.
And the Barker in this is played by Burgess Meredith, famous for playing the Penguin in the Batman 1960 series and for many Twilight Zone episodes and many other things that he acted. A wonderful character actor for the years. I can always recommend anything.
Yeah,
Meredith.
He brought a lot to the role, and including a penguin cigarette and a top hat. So
yeah, because he had the little cigarette holder, and all he was missing was the. And 5 people follow him to the back to meet the god Atropos, one of the fates. There's a waxwork of one of the classic Greek fates.
Who's just a girl who is very good at standing still.
Yeah,
until like the last moment of the film where she's like steadily lowering her scissors.
Her shears, yeah, because traditionally in the Greek fate story, you had 3 different women who were all one creature, who were different phases, who would weave the material essence of creation into threads, and then you'd have another side of the fate who would weave them into the fabric of reality and fate. And at the end, the final part would cut the threads of fate as it was time to remove them from the woven fabric of time.
So all the main characters have their threads cut short.
Right. Each of them are given a glimpse of the future and that's a lot. I just watched Dr. Terror's House of Horror, which is the movie right before this one. It plays a lot of ways as far as a character telling the future of and then giving people to make a chance. And all these people are guilty of different sins, whether it's familial murder in the first story, the relentless ambition of the second story, the controlling domination of the third story.
Now, okay, let's be real. The 2 girl stories, they did not do that anything crazy.
Well, we'll just break it down by each story.
Okay.
We'll talk about in the first story you have the nephew reaching and Logan the entire time was like, is this a case of Charles Dexter Ward?
Well, yeah, because he had a wealthy uncle who only paid for things in pirate gold, right. And that's very much the setup of Charles Dexter Ward.
And you find out basically that this uncle was enslaved to a demon cat named Balthazar, as they pronounce it. Not Balthazar, but Balthazar.
I was very mad they didn't pronounce it Balthazar.
Right.
Well, in that story, if you read Charles Dexter Ward, the H.P. Lovecraft story, then Balthazar would be Charles Dexter Ward.
Okay.
But Balthazar needed people. Dexter Ward didn't really need people,
right? Because he needed people to feed them heads. Because it's very Audrey from Little Shop of Horrors. Instead of blood, it's hey, I need you to cut off the heads of people to feed me.
But it's an adorable kitty cat instead of a piranha plant.
This like black and orange calico-ish cat. Very very small pupils. Feed me, eating the heads of people, and in each of these characters are given a chance to see a supernatural future that they can choose to change their fate, and at the end, Atropos cuts their thread to show the end of their life.
Well, let's say that first story, he was actively bad.
Yes, he chooses to murder his uncle, thinking he has gold somewhere in the home because he owns.
Like he wasn't technically responsible for the death of him, but he could have. He was inactive in
when he puts the medicine to taunt him on the thing to tell me where the gold is. He physically kicks his the chair away.
Yeah.
So he pretty much chooses to kill him.
Yeah. So that guy's actively bad.
Yeah.
Some of the other characters, none of the characters are as actively bad as that guy. I don't think. Even the last guy.
Well, I mean, the last guy still murders the.
But that was like deep into his trials.
Okay. The second one, we have 2 different ladies' stories. The first one, an American lady and a Hollywood climber coming out to the golden city on the coast to try to ply her wares and becoming the great new film actress.
I'm definitely going to try to make ironing a thing for renouncing your enemies or
Right.
just getting rid of people.
Right, because the opening of the story is the lady has a roommate, and the roommate gets a date with a popular director, and so to steal her date, she intentionally burns her is fake ironing the dress and burns the dress that I skipped lunches for an entire month to pay for that dress. And it's like and burns it.
Yeah.
And steals her date to become a social climber and meets with these other folks.
It's odd because like that director wasn't going anywhere. Like he immediately gets ousted.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's the subject to kind of show the seriousness of these other characters, because you find out he's trying to get admittance to this group of elite actors and directors and producers.
Ageless.
Yeah, ageless. They call them the Immortal 10, which you find out is a little apropos because this director doesn't make it into the group, so they.
I guess they killed him.
They killed him.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's the kind of gist of it, is that
Okay.
that they killed him. But she's already kind of wiggled her way into getting a tryout with the director and the actor, to get this new spot. Which strangely she doesn't. She notices while she's sitting with them, she's eating fish, and they're fish and chips and peas, which I don't think anyone was ever serving in Hollywood
Right.
in 1967. I mean, maybe, but
I still don't understand why they ordered like big ass meals, and that's like somehow less covert than being like, I'm full.
and Logan and we're trying to figure out, like, are they, because they're not eating, like, are they vampires?
Right, we had to stop. We had to replay the section where there was a mirror and be
Yeah,
like, was his reflection in there? Well, it wasn't technically. You didn't see his skin.
Right. I've already noticed this, and I'm going to watch a couple more of these and see if it's true. I know there's already some set dressing and little throwbacks to the first movie. The mask of that's used as the voodoo god Damballa from the first movie. It shows up in another one of the films, which I thought was really cool. That they kind of throw that one in, and they have a little part where they play a funeral dirge, which they did exactly the same in the first movie. So I hope that continues. I'm gonna watch a few more of these. And
Speaking of the funeral dirge, that's a good segue into the other girl's story.
Into the third story, with a professional piano player who calls his piano Euterpe, the goddess of music, and the woman who is trying to take.
See, this is the one who I felt was least deserving of anything. Like she was a little overbearing, is what dude, just say no. Like, if she wants you to go out to eat and you don't want to, just say no, honey, I got to practice.
But you kind of get the idea that this fellow, who's a world-class pianist, has been dominated his entire life. In his practice room, he has a picture of his dead mother that stares him at the entire time.
And I guess we both agreed that it's pretty heavily implied that Euterpe is his mom's spirit.
Yeah, I think that's a good guess, because at the end, Euterpe, the piano, forces the woman out the window to
That
throw.
was so cheesy.
To throw her out the window.
I definitely think that story was the weakest in premise and execution. Just like the piano forcing her out of the window was ridiculous.
While playing dun 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 dun. Yes,
it was kind of ridiculous.
But it's that 1960s wonderful type of campy.
Yeah.
Like I was mentioning.
Yeah, but it was hilarious.
Yeah. And the colors and stuff, it's really fun in there. A lot of the side angles, everything gets tilted, and they're like, "Oh, the piano's attacking me." And then we go to the fourth story with the actor played by Jack Palance, who I first learned as being Curly from City Slickers.
That was the best story by far.
This guy's, obsessive sleazeball, glomping onto a guy who's like the world's best.
Touching everything. Priceless collection.
Of this priceless collection of the collector played by Peter Cushing, Grand Moff Tarkin of Star Wars fame. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. But you find out is something of an evil wizard, as he has reanimated the grave dusk of Edgar Allan Poe.
His grandpa.
Oh, his grandfather
right?
did? Okay.
And he was the occult guy. I guess he's still sort of like inherited wizard powers because he's still able to make him write manuscripts for new stories.
That very Lovecraftian is passing down a curse and power through generations. Very weightly.
I feel like altogether that made that Lovecraft story. Especially Lovecraft was so influenced by Poe anyway. To have a story about a dead reincarnated Poe that.
And more stuff we're talking. There's also a bust of Pallas Athena for more references to gods. So we have, and in the story, Jack Palance's character kills the Poe collector to try to take the the undying corpse of Edgar Allan Poe, who's Peter Cushing has been forcing to write new stories for him. He releases him from his trials with the devil, only to have to take his place.
But the best part that made the whole story is, like, after he saw his thread cut, he was so ecstatic. He was totally fangirling out. He was like, oh my God, I get to be Edgar Allan Poe, you guys.
Totally gonna sell my soul.
I can't wait to sell my soul to the devil.
Yeah. And
it's fantastic.
But I picked this for some of the God references that ties back to American gods, because I really liked, or Turpre, being a thought form as a piano taking life because it is thought of as a goddess of music and also could conceivably possessed by the dead spirit of the mother. The goddess Athena, playing on a bunch of stuff in the Edgar Allan Poe story.
Edgar Allan Poe is also sort of a god figure in that, or in the same vein as American gods.
Definitely. I mean, he is the birth of both the creator of the detective story in literature and, the birth of American weird fiction.
Right. And this is a weird fiction story, and he's sort of a god in that, and definitely would fit right at home in American Gods.
And then you have plain old Satan at the end. You find out that Burgess Meredith's character is actually Satan, and he uses this carnival show to recruit, for souls, because he figures if he shows enough people, here's the evil things that can happen to you. Is it worth it? Because basically, it's a lot. It's low rent. Soul collecting, because you just have people come in, show them things, and then some people want it.
And Fangirl Dude, that's win-win-win.
Yep.
Because he's like, I'm already selling my soul to you later, homie.
It's totally like lights Satan's cigarette.
Yeah. He's like, let's do this. Where do I sign?
So these are the morals that Amicus was teaching the children in 1967. But I enjoy this movie, and I definitely want to get you to watch some of their later films. Amicus, although I'm not as big on some of their non-anthology stories, they did a huge collection of anthology stories. Dr. Terror's House of Horrors. We have this movie, Torture Garden, The House That Dripped Blood. There's like 4 more. The first 2 that I ever learned were the original Tales from the Crypt and Vault of Horror stories, where they made these horror anthology films based directly on stories from Tales from the Crypt and on Tales from the Crypt and Vault of Horror. Specifically, these first ones were all based in stories written by Robert Bloch, famous for writing the novel of Psycho, that Alfred Hitchcock based his film on. But so, did you enjoy it?
I did. I thought it did tie very well into my very loose theme of carnival sideshow weirdness and how it relates to American Gods.
Right, because it looks weird and dark when you go for it, but some people are going to buy into it. Where you sell your soul for Edgar Allan Poe.
Can't wait.
All right then. Well, thanks for everybody listening in. This has been the second episode of The Deep End with Halen Pittman. This has been my guest Logan Jenkins.
Bye.
All right, and everyone have a good night.